William, your videographer from Two Hats Publishing. Welcome to the College of Complexes, being held at Barbeck's Restaurant at 8949 Garland Road, Dallas, Texas. Gently embracing the east side of White Rock Lake. When I entered, I was greeted like coming home to Grandma's house, warm and friendly. When visiting the Barbeck's Restaurant, tell them you want your reservations for the next College of Complex class.
Well, welcome to the College of Complexes. This is our 232nd meeting since we started in February of 2009. We put a speaker on every week, a different subject. We require a speaker to take a position on an issue, express a point of view. He must be for or against something. We don't care what it is. If anybody interrupts the speaker, remind the interrupter that we only listen to one fool at a time. That's one of our rules. And can you hear me all right? All right. Huh? A little squeak. Testing 1, 2, sound better? I don't know. All right. We put a speaker on every week, a different subject. I mentioned that. If anybody interrupts the speaker, remind him we only listen to one fool at a time. We give our speaker an hour to make a presentation. We have question and answers, not speeches afterwards from the audience. And then we have remarks, rebuttals. Everyone in this audience that wants to gets 5 minutes at this podium to respond to what the speaker said for or against. And our speaker gets to comment and close the meeting. He gets the last word. That's how it works. But before we put on our speaker, we have announcements. Are there any announcements? Anybody have any announcements they want to make? Susie, you got any announcements you want to make? Well, I think you're it. Anybody have any announcements they want to make? No. Well, I got a couple, but I'll do them last. You have an announcement? Come on up here. The what? Oh yeah, Susan made a cake tonight. She said it's not her best, but it's a good cake. It's a pound cake, so that'll be dessert later on. We're gonna get them to serve it up. So just save some room with. No. Oh, for what it's worth, the next 2 weeks we will not have the College of Complexes, just so you know. Yeah, because next week is the Democratic Convention, and so many people are going to that, it's going to interfere with this. So, therefore, it's best not to do it. And the following week is July 4th, so that's another big, everybody leaves town. So, we'll have it, the next meeting will be July 12th. Incidentally, that's Jim Love, he's going to be our speaker July 12th. He's sitting over on the side there. He's going to address the wealth gap. That's what he's going to talk about. It's on your itinerary. You can read it. I'm not going to read all this to you. July 19th, we have the Lessons from the Fall of the Roman Empire with Lloyd Chappelle. That ought to be good. And on July 26th, we have Stop Alec. That's with Gene Lance. That's also on your itinerary. You can look at it. So that ought to be good. Now, I'm waiting for these speakers that want to come up. I think Susie has something to say. You have the mic.
Yes, I do. Hey everybody, I wanted to remind you that next Wednesday night is the 1-year anniversary of a major filibuster that occurred down in Austin, right? And there are parties, house parties, and all kinds of different things going on to commemorate that event. So if that is something that you're interested in, I suggest that you check out Battleground Texas and see if there's one close to you. A filibuster party. And I'll just tell you that Dallas County East Democrats, that's the day of our regular meeting, which is Wednesday the 25th, and we're backing up our meeting to 5 o'clock because we intend to have a filibuster party celebration there. And so grab a couple of friends and come to our meeting. It's at Martinez Restaurant, 901 Gross Road in Mesquite. That'll be this coming Wednesday night, 5 o'clock. Okay, and then Thursday starts the Texas State Democratic Convention at the Convention Center in downtown Dallas. I know it costs about $15 to park, so if you're planning on going, you may want to carpool or, you can take the train, sure, if you live close to the train or would like to do that. There's a big kickoff reception that starts at 6 o'clock. That is, I believe it's a fundraiser. So I think the tickets to that are $50 a piece. There's also the Lady Bird Johnson breakfast the next morning that starts at 9 o'clock. Oh, I'm sorry, that's Saturday morning. Thank you. Saturday morning. Okay, yeah, but I think they're done on volunteers for that. For the breakfast, right. So that's another fundraiser as well, and it's a great opportunity to meet other Democrats, to meet candidates, the people that you're voting on. I'm sure there will be speakers. I believe the breakfast is $25. But I'm going to tell you, there is an interest group caucus for almost every single interest group that you could possibly imagine, and the caucuses will be going on all day long on Friday. I'm just going to bring to light a couple of them. I know we have some environmentalists in the crowd. There's the environmental Dems will be starting their caucus at 9 o'clock on Friday morning. There's the state Tejano Democrats is having their meeting in the Convention Center ballroom that at 10 o'clock. I always enjoy going to the oil patch Democrats because we're talking about people who work in the oil and gas industry. We're talking about engineers, about those who understand safe practices. And I'm going to tell you, that was one of the best caucuses that I ever attended down in Houston. Shortly after the Deepwater Horizon well collapsed, and there was an engineer who got up and spoke who explained exactly all the fail-safes that had to go wrong for that to occur. So there's also LGBT. I'm wearing my colorful clothing in honor of the very first Pride Parade out in Longview, Texas today that we did not end up going to because we came here instead. So anyway, all different kinds of caucuses. I think you guys will really enjoy it. There are different parties, after parties. There were a number of ladies who wanted to know about the Common Ground on Reproductive Rights, which is basically understanding how to talk about those reproductive rights that we should all be able to enjoy or participate in. Planned Parenthood simply means wanting to be responsible parents, not accidental parents. Wanting to be able to have access to birth control, to health screenings and that sort of thing. So that finding common ground on reproductive rights, that will be at the state convention. It starts at 10 o'clock as well on Saturday. So there's just a plethora of things. You should get out there, look online if you're planning to go to the convention. Know that if you're not already signed up as a delegate or as an alternate, that you'll have to pay $25 to get in. There may still be some alternate delegate spots for your senatorial district, but you just have to check that out. Get online, check it out. And again, I hope to see you guys at the convention Thursday night for the reception and some of the free parties. Friday all day long, Saturday all day long. We're going to be voting on some really important issues like the platform. Yes. Yeah, there are a lot of fundraisers and different parties that go on as well. And I'm so happy that it's here in Dallas this time. We don't have to travel. It's great. I mean, just pop in if you can. Thank you very much.
Any other announcements? Now's the time. Any announcements? No? Announcements? Jim, you got your usual announcement? No? All right, whatever you like.
Whatever I like. Well, I think I'll sing 3 songs. Give you a little Ralph Waldo Emerson, and maybe we'll get around to the speaker tonight. Well, short and sweet. Everybody, I think, has been here. Just a reminder to, we appreciate being able to meet here in Barbex and take good care of them. They do a great job of dealing with all of us simultaneously with diverse appetites, and we appreciate that. Take good care of our server for taking good care of us tonight. We don't have to pay them tuition for the room, which we appreciate, and we want to be sure we're a sound financial contributor to their cause on Saturday night. So just remember it and take good care of everybody, and we'll be happy campers. Hope you enjoy it tonight. We have a good speaker coming up. Get a good dose of medicine. Thanks.
Okay, just so you know, you got it clear, there's going to be no meeting for the next 2 weeks. So we will not meet for 2 more weeks because next week is the Democratic Convention. It interferes with this. A lot of people here will be going to that. And the following week is the 4th of July weekend. So that's another everybody's out of town week. So next time we'll have a meeting is July 12th. That'll be Jim Love. He's sitting right there. He'll be our speaker. So just thought I'd mention that again. I won't be here. Well, that's another thing. I'll be gone for the month of July. So Jim's going to bring the equipment that night and we'll try to work it out. So we'll be back sometime in August. Anyway, our speaker tonight is John Beesley. He's going to talk about rewards of supply-side economics. He's an English-born author, retired from a long career with Xerox, educated in London's Imperial College, University of Dallas, MBA, DIC, PhD. We'll discuss how the general American public has been duped into thinking that supply-side economics would bring home the bacon. It certainly did for some, but not for most. The theory always was fallacious, but now, after over 30 years, the empirical evidence is unequivocal. Naturally, some quarters still sing the same old 19th century song. The solution, which you will also discuss, is the same one we have known for more than 75 years, but being counterintuitive is still hard to accept. It's very, very hard to gainsay simple things. Well, anyway, without further ado, please give a very, very warm welcome to John Beesley. Can you hear that right? You have the floor, sir.
Thank you. You can all put my notes in place. Well, thank you for coming tonight. You've come to hear about the dismal subject, it's called the dismal science of economics. So I try not to make you too unhappy. In fact, economics is not really a science, it's a pseudoscience, but as I tell my friends, but there you go. So tonight I'm going to talk about supply-side economics and who got the rewards and how they got them. So this subject, supply-side economics, was all the rage in the 1980s. It was sometimes called Reaganomics. Later on, George Bush called it voodoo economics, but however, there it stands. Now, so why did this come into fashion? Well, it really came into fashion because of the decade that preceded it. And we must even go back to the late 1960s. Now, the late 1960s, 2 events happened that caused inflation. One was the Vietnam War, and the second was the Great Society that President Johnson introduced. Now, all would have been well if the taxes had been raised to pay for these 2 events, but they weren't raised enough. So if you read, I'm sure you may have done, the Economist magazine in those days, but having surveyed this expenditures, they forecast that this would cause inflation, and it did. But then in the 70s, a third event happened called the Arab-Israeli War, and so the OPEC Arabs got together because they were protesting against the West to jack up the price of oil. So in 1973, oil went from $3 a barrel to $10 a barrel in a year. Well, that had, of course, tremendous inflationary effects. And by the end of the decade, price of a barrel of oil went up to $35 a barrel. So over 7 years, oil went up by a factor of 10. So you had a tremendous inflationary effect right throughout the economy. So what happens when you have inflation? Well, this of course causes all prices to rise. But generally speaking, the incomes do not rise to keep up with this inflationary pressure. So what happens is you effectively have a decrease in demand, which causes a recessionary effect on the economy. So the 1970s, you had a new phenomenon which was called stagflation. That's to say you had stagnation and inflation combined, which is a very unusual set of affairs, but that's what happened. Now, so because of this stagflation, you had unions up in arms trying to keep up the standard of living in America and the West generally. So there was industrial strife, there was recession, and so on. Now, interestingly enough, in the early 1970s, Nixon was the president, and those of you, and I was here then, and he introduced price controls. Surprisingly, a socialist remedy for curing inflation. But here you had a GOP president introducing price controls. It didn't work because inflation was growing too fast. So at the end of the decade, after this terrible stagflation and economic strife, strikes and whatnot, and a recession in the middle of the 70s, the public looked around to blame. So poor Jimmy Carter got the blame here, and the Labour government in England got the blame there. So enter the stage of Thatcher in England and Reagan here. So the cure for stagflation was supply-side economics. And that was going to bring home the bacon and cure everything. So what is supply-side economics? Well, in truth, it goes back all the way to Adam Smith in the theory of how the economy works. So he likened it to a company is generating income, and of course it pays its workforce, and of course the owners, of course, got more money. And in those days, because most working people hardly survived, so it was the rich owners that then could reinvest their profits back into the economy. That's the supply side, which was really investment in the economy, in their economy, in their businesses. The business would grow and pay more wages, hire more people, more profits, so we'd flow around in this virtuous circle. So the supply side would drive growth. Another economist, Frenchman, J.B. Say, introduced the notion that the supply always equals the demand, because in his theory, the supply creates the demand. And the rationale was that an entrepreneur, an owner of a business, invests in the business, builds a bigger factory, hires workers, so that flows through as income. So the supply of building and increasing production causes income, that's to say the demand. So the money, the income from these people flows back as a demand. So the theory was that the demand would always rise to meet the supply. So you couldn't have an out of balance situation because the one begat the other. And so this was generally accepted for over 100 years. And then that was the general, what you call classical economic thinking. And then came the Great Depression, 1930. And so you had a tremendous crash in the economy. And the theory was, well, you know, this would recover because the supply would all would be well. Well, unfortunately, it didn't. In fact, the economy crashed, went down, and it stabilized at a low rate. It didn't really recover for a decade or more. So that sort of dented the theory of J.B. Say. So then we had we come to modern times. So let's look at how the model of the U.S. economy, normal economies, work. Here's my first chart. And I have a pointer, which I will point to. So this is the model of the economy. So here we have. Now I'll just take yeah, not the moving one. Discuss it. This will be a night of looking at charts. Okay, so this is the model of the U.S. economy. So here we have the total economy of the USA, and its measure of its productiveness is called the gross national product, and that's the product of all the goods and services being produced in the economy. And so what you have are two sectors. You have the private sector, private companies, and you have the public sector. And so the economy produces wages, dividends, and interest, and this flows around to produce the economy in the economy. Am I speaking? Yes, I am. And so generally, this money flows around providing the total income to the working population. That income flows off into 3 and actually 4 different places. Roughly speaking, when the economy is working properly, roughly 70% flows off in demand, that's to say consumer spending, buying goods and services. 10% flows into savings, and roughly 20% flows into taxes. And so the government takes the taxes and in fact funds the public sector. Basically, there's an investment in roads and schools and so on. And the savings flows through as private investment through the financial system, of which I'll talk a bit later, and part of it will flow back into investment. So so when you talk about supply side, you mean that this must be healthy to create a healthy economy. And of course, the supply side, as would say, that is the lack of this investment flowing around that causes the problem. And so that was the rage in the 1980s. And the reason for bringing it up today is the fact that institutes like the Civitas Institute in Washington still promote the same thing, exactly the same rhetoric as uttered by the supply side people in the 1980s. Now, the other thing that's happened actually since Reaganomics is that this income now is also flowing off into imports, interest payments, dividends, and money transfers. And the peak just before the recent recession was 5%. So instead of having a normal 10% savings, the savings from the year 2000 to the crash was about 2%. Very low. So this outflow of money actually decreases this investment. So that's one of the, and I'll go into that later, but that's one of the effects of this so huge transfer of money overseas. It does decrease investment. So that's generally how the model of the economy works. Inside companies, of course, there's some retained earnings that flows back, but that's usually fairly small relative to this supply side that should flow in and increase the what I call the economic engine of the country. So what do the supply siders say, and how do we, basically in the middle of the 80s there was a recession. In fact, what happened, as I said, there was stagflation, but inflation was really high because of the factors I've just described. So Paul Volcker, who was head of the Federal Reserves, killed inflation by jacking up interest rates, which got over 20%, as some of you may remember. And that killed the economy, decreased the economy, but certainly killed inflation. So by crashing the economy, you can always cure inflation. And of course, strange to say, as you all see, Reagan decreased taxes, which was a stimulus to the economy. So there was the Federal Reserve causing a recession, and Ronald Reagan reducing taxes as stimulus. So the two things were acting in totally opposite directions. In fact, Volcker won. So what do the supply siders say? They say, well, look, we're in the 1980s recession. So how do we cure it? How do we get out of it? Well, the problem is we don't have enough supply side. So why is that? Well, there are three reasons. The first one, that you're very familiar with, there is too much government regulations. That's hampering entrepreneurs getting going, see. That's the first thing they all say. So we must reduce regulations. Secondly, there's too much government spending here, which is taking the bite out of true savings. So we have to reduce government spending. And by the way, we're spending on terrible things that we don't need anyway. So it's good that we have efficiencies and cut it. And thirdly, they say that the trade unions have too much power, and they're getting too much money, and they're spending too much, which is where they should be saving. See? So they attack the unions, and they attack the government for those three factors. John Kenneth Galbraith summed it up like this, that the supply side has said the problem is the rich aren't getting enough income and tax breaks, so they're discouraged from investing, see, and engaging in entrepreneurial activity, and the very poor are getting too much government handouts, so that discourages them from working. So the two things work together, which is quite amusing. So let's see what happened. Let's see this next chart here. I've forgotten what it is. Oh yes. This was the history of taxation. Here is this is the tax rate cut of the income from 1960 to current day. You see, so let's talk about the top rate of income tax. So back 1960, it was 90%. And Kennedy had cut the income tax down to 70%. Now, a tax rate will stimulate the economy, but the question is, does it stimulate enough to take more tax than because you've increased the economy? See? Does it pay for itself, in other words? So the supply siders say, well, cut taxes will always pay for itself. That's usually what they say. Then we had Nixon coming in, and he actually, even though, as I said before, the Vietnam War was going on and the Great Society was happening, he actually this was Johnson, raised it up here and here to pay, but it wasn't enough. Nixon came in and reduced it back again to 70%, and so inflation happened. Now, what Nixon said was he'd suffer inflation, but what he didn't want to suffer was unemployment, because he knew that the public would stand that, but not. So he was after being re-elected, which he was, of course. Then we come to the Reagan era, and you can see there was a monumental decrease in the top rate of taxation from 70%, 2 steps down to 30%. That did not pay for itself. That did not, the supply side has said, yes, it's going to pay for itself. That's what, beautiful, wonderful. It did not pay for itself. So when Uncle George Bush Sr. came in, he had a budget deficit. And even though he said, read my lips 10 times, he had to raise taxes. So you see, that's when the taxes went up. The top rate went up and the capital gains rate up. The corporate taxes basically remained fairly steady here. Then, on the basis of that, read my lips and not raising taxes, he was dismissed from office. So we had the Clinton era, which was pretty much steady. George Bush Jr. came in and it lowered taxes again, especially capital gains rates. Now, if you're a hedge fund manager, most of your income will come as capital gains. So you're paying below 20% in taxes. If you're earning the same amount in income, you see you're paying double that. So the hedge fund boys in Wall Street really love this, really love it, because they're paying way less than anybody else. So that's wonderful. You know, I wish I were a hedge fund manager, but here I am, and smiling too. So that's the history of taxation. So supposedly you reduce taxes and all this. Well, under certain circumstances it will, but mostly it won't. I mean, you must have enough taxes to keep the economy going. So what happens in a recession? So this shows what happens in the last recession. You see that the minute there's a hint that there's going to be a recession, a downturn, people get laid off and hours are reduced. And you can see that in this last recession, hours, and this is 100%, reduced down to, so 10% of the working hours got reduced in that recession. And of course, that flows through the whole economy. So the demand gets reduced, taxes get reduced, so the whole economy is impacted. Now, you can see that consumer spending here followed the income down here in this slope. But at a certain point, people must put food on the table. So to make up the difference, they start borrowing. And you'll see this where this borrowing is in the next chart. So this is what happened to the average Joe in America over the period from 1945 to current day. This is this red dotted line is the gross domestic product. That's to say the product of the whole country per capita, per person. And this blue line is the median family income. That's to say, what is the median family income getting out of the gross national product? And you'll see in the golden decades, 1945-50 to the late 70s, you'll see that the median family income gained a growing share of the GDP. It kept track with the GDP. But you can see that starting in the late 70s, this began to diverge downwards. And even until here, from about 2000 onwards, it's basically not grown much at all. But the GDP has grown. So where did this money go? Well, let's have a look. My God, we had an economic collapse then. So this here chart is the income of the 1%, the famous one, as a percentage of the GDP from 1920 to current day. You can see in 1920 it was just under. This is I had a miscue here, but that's 20%. So 20%, 1/5 of the gross national product went to the 1%. So over the years, because of unions and stuff and so on, it came down and down and down until about the mid-70s, when it was about 8%, 7 to 8%. But because of these Reaganomic tax cuts, you see, starting in the 80s, you saw a dramatic jump from about 8% up to about 13%. Then it leveled off during the Clinton era, and then with Bush Jr. it jumped up again to a point where it's above the level it was in the 1920s. And some people say it's... So basically 1/5 of all the income of America is going to the 1%. So that's where this growth in the GDP has gone, to the 1%. Now, the theory is that this 1% will invest this money and into the real economy, and all will be well. Well, I think this next chart, let me see. No, not quite yet. So this is the US trade deficit. And as I might say to the Tea Party personages, it's the trade deficit, stupid. Let me repeat. It's the trade deficit, stupid. So let's see what happened and why it happened. You can see this trade deficit runs from 1960 to current day. This chart runs from 0 down to $1 trillion. This is the annual trade deficit. So you can see that from 1960 to roughly the mid-70s, it was roughly imbalanced. And then, of course, we had OPEC and the oil price rises. And in fact, US had peak oil production in the early 70s. So the trade deficit went negative.
Your business has folded.
I know, my business exploded. Let's pull this out. So my batteries have dropped out too. I have the point. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, I see it, Nick. I'll put. My goodness. Yeah. Oh. My goodness. Can you sit there?
I'll just sit back here and hold it.
Yeah, thank you. Well, you can just hold it, Susie. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Okay. All right. Okay. So this is the trade deficit. So we got to the 1980s, and of course that's when Japan entered the picture. So we had a lot of imports from Japan. So the trade deficit got worse. Here we had a recession. So when you have a recession, and the trade deficit, imports fall down, so the trade deficit improves. The 90s we had NAFTA, which is touted as being a wonderful benefit for all concerned, but the trade deficit with Canada and Mexico went up. So even though they knew that with these policies of NAFTA and so on, the trade deficit would get worse, we had the World Trade Organization permitting China to join, and then, boy, we really went to town. So until we had a trade deficit of more than 0.8 trillion a year. 0.8 trillion a year. The recession killed it somewhat, but now we're coming back again. So this trade deficit, as I say, at peak, was 5% of the gross national product. That's a big chunk out of the the supply side. So, and so cumulatively, the US now owes about $12 trillion because of this. So, you know, that's serious money. And basically, the reason why this all happened was right here. Once you started attacking the unions as to blame for everything, then the power of trade unions evaporated, and so the corporation decided they could export jobs and businesses without any opposition, and basically there was none. Now, the thing that's quite remarkable is most of this wealth went to China, that's gained in wealth, and now China is now a military power, is threatening Japan in the China Sea, and threatening even Vietnam. And America's getting very worried about this, apparently. Well, goodness me, couldn't you, I mean, come on, couldn't you see this going on? Were you asleep? No, I think not. I think that the 1% knew very well. They were doing great, but they were putting American interests in grave jeopardy. In fact, as my book says, they were sabotaging American interests, in fact. Right, next one. Now, this shows US manufacturing employment, and you see the chart here running from 75 to current day. So in 77, and so there's 20 million people here, and down here you've got 10 million. So you had roughly 20 million people in manufacturing, and so that was 22% of the non-farm employment. So over one in five people were in manufacturing employment. So you see, as these recessions happened, it sort of gradually went down. China entered the picture, and whew. So now we're down at about just over 11 million people in manufacturing, and that's 9%. So less than 1 in 10 now are in manufacturing. So you can see how this has caused a tremendous loss of income to America, and it's, as I say, benefited the 1% greatly because they've moved the production base overseas. They've had the strong dollar policy and so on, and NAFTA. So, and of course, this is totally unsustainable. It's totally unsustainable, and yet nobody talks about this. No one brings this up. None of the politicians, not Obama, not anybody. Well, good luck to him. Did he get elected? Yeah. No, I mean, I don't fault Ron Paul in everything. He should have stuck to medicine, but never mind. No, I mean, you must make a more convincing case. I mean, actually, the man in the street knew this was going on, but naturally, he was totally ignored, as most people in America are ignored. So their interests and long-term well-being of themselves and their families is being ignored by these politicians, which is why my friends laugh when I talk about, I dislike all politicians. All right, now, here is another chart. Oops, sorry, Susie, I will have to put a brace there. All right, you hear that, you hear all this talk about, the deficits. The deficits are terrible, okay? So let's look at what the deficits are, who has them, and where they are. Yeah, that's it. No backbone. All right. The first one I'll talk about, let's talk about the deficit. This is running from 1970 to current day. This is the deficit as a percentage of the gross national product. Now, when you go for a mortgage, generally speaking, they don't mind if you have about 300% of your income. So, totally, if you add all these things up, we're over that now. So there is concern in total. What can the GDP actually pay for? So this is the, here in blue is a household. Now, as I say, household was running at about 60% of the GDP for a long time, and because its income, as I explained, was going down as a share of GDP, it gradually got assumed more and more debt. The federal debt, business debt, by the way, also has been rising too over the period. The federal deficit, in fact, climbed a lot during the Reagan era, you see. It was down around 40%, went up. This is the Clinton era where it stabilized, came down a bit. Then because of the recession, it went up a bit. It's actually, of late, coming down. But the big surprise, the big misinformation, is the big rising debt here from the financial sector. It's gone from 20% up to 120%. So what did this was purely borrowing by the hedge funds and the banks from the Federal Reserve. So it funded the dot-com bubble, and it funded the housing bubble. And then that was completely, overblown and overdone, and that's what's led to a huge amount of problems. This is huge financial debt. So when people talk about the debt problem, this is the main culprit. It's the financial world. The financial world. Now let's look at the last chart, which is what happened in this last recession. So here in green is the US. So 2008, of course, the recession began. So the US went up a bit. Middle of the year, it started going down. And this is the gross national product, by the way. So it lost 4%, over 4%, by the middle of 2009. And then because of the stimulus that was much deplored by everybody on the right, stimulus cut in, and so the economy grew back again. So 3 years in, we'd recovered, and now the US economy is 4% more than it was in the beginning of 2008. So it's basically recovered slowly, but it has recovered. We look at Germany, similar picture. It actually went down to over 6% drop, and it recovered in about 3 years. And because of the euro crisis and whatnot, it's slowly recovering. But let's look at the UK. You had a tremendous crash, and the reason for this big crash was because 20% of GDP is finance. And as you know, the financial world just crashed. It too started to recover. But what happened here? Well, I was in England and voted, and the nasty party came back into power. The Conservative Party with the Lib Dems came back into power. And of course, they are supply-siders. So what's one article of faith? Cut government spending. So they slashed government departments by 30% here, 40% there. I mean, the Tea Party will have loved it. Look what happened to the GDP, flatline. See, that's what you do when you're ideological and we're going to cut, and they did. So look where we are. We flatlined it. Now, with 1 year to go to the election, they're beginning to. So, oh boy, we're growing as fast. Look, our policies must have worked. But we have still not got back to where we were. Now, the other economies have recovered. UK hasn't. So that's what happens when you slash government spending too rapidly for ideological reasons. So, So let me get to one of the other great fallacies. If I go back to my first chart, I don't know if we're going to make this, but we might. Oh, yes, we will. How about that? So, the main thing to understand is you must have, in an economy, you must have balance. Like in life, really, you must have balance. So, you must have supply side, increased investment going in, and you must have demand that matches that. And when you get out of balance, then you have trouble. So you can't just say, well, demand doesn't matter. In fact, what happens is when you have a recession, then you don't automatically get increased investment because there is an item called manufacturing utility capacity. And so generally speaking, if that capacity is rated at, say, 100%, that's the productive power of the economy. Normally, it runs around, peaks up at 90%. So you always have about 10% unused. And so in the decades, the virtuous decades, the average utilization, okay, well, it'll work with it. It stays in, yeah. But I think I'll use my hand. Sorry, Susie, keep holding. Don't let me down. So generally speaking, what happens is that what happened in the decades after the war, you run around an average of about 80%. Now, since the late 70s, we've had an average utilization of about 70%. So there's always unused capacity. Okay. Now, when you have a recession, the demand drops, and you have extra unused capacity. So why on earth would you spend money to build capacity that nobody has demand for? I mean, that doesn't make sense. So on the face of it, it's fallacious. That doesn't work that way. Doesn't work that way. In fact, the only way you're going to recover an economy is the only place it can ever come from is government spending. And that's what Keynes said. You spend money, you're creating demand by the government. That recovers demand and the economy will recover. And that was his big message. So it violated Say's laws, it violated Adam Smith. That's the one point to know. Now the other thing is that he introduced a term called macroeconomics. That's to say, you're looking at the whole economy. Now, people like Thatcher said, there's no such thing as community in the whole economy. Everyone's an individual. You look at everything like a family. So when a family has a loss in income, naturally you spend less, okay? Because you don't have the money. So you then aggregate that up to mirror the whole economy. So we all spend less and think, well, it doesn't work. If we all spend less, demand drops, and so you have a death spiral. That's what happened in the 30s, a death spiral. And that was a salient point that Keynes said. When you're in this death spiral, the only way out of it is to the government spend. Now, naturally, when you're booming, the government should reduce spending, because then, if they don't, you have inflation. So the two sides must always be in balance. So you need the supply side, but you need demand too. So the trick in the economic world is to have balance in an economy. That's the trick. It's tough and difficult, but we have a system that's very peculiar. We have a private bank here, Federal Reserve, which can change interest rates, the monetary side of things. And then we have a government here that creates the fiscal side of things, completely independent of each other. I mean, it's a ridiculous system. I certainly wouldn't have a private bank funding other private banks. I mean, that's ludicrous to begin with. And as I proposed before, you have one authority controlling both things. Now, the real problem is, do we have people of integrity and brains to run such a thing? Now, that does take some doing. Yes, sir.
Use the microphone.
No, not necessarily. No. Yeah, it was a question. What the gentleman said is, when you have more government spending, that becomes a more socialist state. No, this is not a permanent government spending. It's to boost the economy. It should go up and down. So once you have a boom going on, the economy is recovered, then you can take your foot off the accelerator. That's the way it works. An important point. Thank you. Now, so that's now. Now, of course, the other thing, of course, that's aggravated things is this, which I've just covered. Really, is this shipping off the manufacturing base overseas. I mean, that's really buggered things up a lot. But I think the main fallacy is this notion of private investment. We pay the rich more, we cut taxes, and you get increased private investment. Well, let's talk about that. So what do we mean by private investment? Well, there are two aspects here that you have to understand. You have investment and you have speculation. So what do the rich do when they have money? I mean, sorry, you ask questions afterwards. Sorry. Yeah. Okay, well, I'll answer it. So I was going to ask you. I know it was rhetorical. I'm full of rhetorical flourishes. I ask myself the question, and that's what we do. Well, of course, they so-called invested. Okay, so what is the biggest investment vehicle in the world today? The answer is the Forex market. So what's a Forex? That's a foreign exchange market. The biggest part of it is operated out of London. And that market every day runs at 3 to 4 trillion a day. A day. And that's a major market for speculation. So every day, because I'm going back to England again soon, I look at the exchange rate. Boom. So that's pure. They're gambling on changes in the exchange rates. That's a huge market for hedge funds. So the rich are putting their money into gambling on the Forex market. What other thing do they do? Gold. So is there any investment around here when you buy gold? No, not $1 goes. Okay? So far, we've had no money, no supply going around here at all. Thirdly, stock market. So when you buy a stock, you're usually buying it from somebody else. Again, that's 100% speculation, unless you have stock in an initial stock offering or a company has issued new shares. Now that is investment. But over 90% of all transactions, probably more than that, is just pure speculation. And as I've said before, the average life of the ownership of a share in America is 22 seconds. 22 seconds. Now, such is the investment. It's pure speculation. Now, what other things do the rich do? They put their money into commodity trading and speculation. Now, the main market is up in Chicago. 85 to 90% of all the trading is speculation. Now, as you know, commodity market was set up so that a farmer could plant his wheat and be sure of a price for his product a year or so. A baker could then put a forward contract, so he'd be buying wheat at a certain price, so everybody was happy. That was a good deal to do. However, with this massive amount of speculation, you don't have a free market anymore. Supply, I mean, it's a nonsense. In most of these markets I've just discussed, the idea of supply market is ludicrous. It just doesn't happen. It's pure speculation. And you see by my chart where the financial money to the financial world went to, it's all gone into this massive world of speculation. Very little has gone back into the real economy where we want it to go. So where else is it going into? Well, we've all heard about derivatives, right? Derivative is where you speculate on the movement of an asset. You know, the movement of a price. You know. Now that's 100%. And that, even now, is like a 500 trillion a year market. Even now. And with no regulations yet. Bonds. If you buy a bond, now you're buying it from somebody. That's speculation. Unless you're buying a new issue from the government or the private sector. So this whole notion that the rich need to get richer to fund the supply side is a total nonsense. I mean, it's just not true. We're living in a world of speculation, and it's totally harming the real economy. The real economy. So, what with one thing and another, this low savings rate, because people generally aren't earning enough, it's really hurt the whole picture. And of course, I mentioned this, the supply side bubbles with .com and housing. So that's the picture. Now, the other thing that's really bedeviled the matter is the U.S. cartels. Really, we have a world dominated by cartels, and the American cartels have accumulated overseas about $3 to $4 trillion, which they don't want to repatriate and pay taxes. So just the other few months ago, Pfizer, who has $1 trillion or so in monies overseas, wanted to buy a UK company called AstraZeneca. Okay, so they don't want to buy assets overseas because they don't want to pay taxes by bringing the money back. So that's one indication of what's happening in the market. Okay, so that's really the supply side scenario. Really, we need both, but it must be in balance. And the idea that we slash government, we blah blah blah, is totally fallacious. So what do we do? What should you do as to run a proper economy for the benefit of everybody? Well, the first thing we need to do is bring back manufacturing to America. Clearly, we can't go on exporting jobs. We never should have permitted the American companies to set up a manufacturing base overseas. I mean, the famous Dyson in England made his vacuum cleaner and shipped it overseas because apparently after the Thatcher disaster, where it destroyed manufacturing, but there wasn't the manufacturing knowledge or facility in England to build some of it anymore. Well, he discovered that he was building his his blade air dryer, and so the Chinese copied it. So he protested, and he won in court. He was given a compensation of a few $1 million. It was never paid. So, the idea that you can operate in the Chinese world like this is ludicrous. I mean, they must be laughing all the way to the bank. I mean, they just can't believe what Americans have done to themselves. I mean, I can't. And I've lived here about 46 years now. I can't believe it. I just cannot believe it, what's happened. I just can't believe it. I've seen it, watched it. And back 30 years ago, I talked about this. I predicted this would happen. I still can't believe it. But England's no different, because the same mentality, this nonsense has gone on. Now, had the King's plan been adopted in Bretton Woods all those years ago, you'd have had balanced trade. You could not have done this. Now, when America was on the gold standard in the 19th century, when if you ran a trade deficit, you paid in gold. Well, when the gold ran out, that was it. You couldn't run it anymore. But with fiat money like this, you can do it. So the other thing I would do is never permit foreign students, Chinese or Indians, to come and learn in the most advanced centers of technical research in this country. Because that information is gold, and it's getting back to China and India. So I'd make sure that the centers of advanced research, and I was in one in London, you don't give that information away. I know the colleges love it to get this income, but that is a vital national treasure and resource. I would also make sure that the very best, cleverest students go to college and free, even if they're dirt poor, because that's a future national resource we should treasure and nurture. I mean, I went to college in England for free. So I have 3 degrees, my bachelor's, my DIC and PhD from Imperial for free, because that's what they did. That's what the Labour Party did after the war. 3 things: housing, healthcare, education. So if you concentrate on the people, you'll get the result. But if you do clownish things like this, I mean, you'll also get the result. But you can only blame the politicians that have let this happen, bought off by these 1% clowns, who, generally speaking, when you meet them, have no brains whatsoever. And certainly no noblesse oblige or love of their country. No, they don't care. They don't care. I live in this country and I buy American things as much as possible, and so, I honor it. Anyway, the other thing we badly need, of course, is financial reform. So I would go way beyond Glass-Steagall. I think we should re-establish savings and loans, mutually owned as we used to have, where the community saves mutually and the mortgages get paid that way, and it's properly monitored and managed. You don't have these excessive bubbles to benefit Wall Street. Secondly, I would go back to having high street banks, normal commercial banks, where we put our money. Thirdly, we have true investment banks that where we put our savings and our pension plans and investment and insurance money. That money gets lent by bonds only to companies. So it goes from here to here. And you don't get this as speculative environment here. Thirdly, I've advocated this before, we have what I call, but funded by the government and the states, business creation banks. I would rather pay money to people to start businesses than pay them to be unemployed. We can get down, see, in England in the 50s, 60s, unemployment rate was about 1.5%, I mean, all the way through without high inflation. Okay? Now the best American can do is 5%. Okay, which is about 8 million people. Now we know the 5% is a lie, it's more like 8%. So there's always about 12 million people that will be unemployed, always in this system. Because the theory went, the supply side, is that if you have a lower rate of employment than that nominal amount, then too much, you'd have pressure on wages, okay, and that would cause inflation. Well, the true cause of inflation, as we've seen, because we've had the unions wrecked and we've had lower wages, is lack of competition. Okay, what we've had, and you've seen it, you've all seen it. Walk up and go to any city, you'll see the same stores, the same chains. Okay, and the mom and pops have disappeared. You know, today I replaced my alternator, okay, you know. There's only about a couple of places I could buy it from, okay. So, you know, one of my friends who just died, he had a chain of auto stores. He couldn't start up today. You know, it's impossible. He couldn't do it. So really, when you have oligopolies, that's what keeps the prices up. Basically, you have near monopolies. And because of these overseas cartels we have just a few major overseas cartels that dominate major markets. Okay, and they're the ones that set the WTO rules and so on. So I would ban this high-frequency trading that I talked about. I think we should introduce a Tobin tax that would be a small tax on financial transactions to stop all this massive speculation, because the cumulative amount of this would stop it. I mean, it does no purpose, really. It's just, you know, totally speculative and gambling. The other thing, as I say, I would leave the casino banks, because most of the money, if it went into the right banks, the amount going into these casino banks, as I call them, you know, would be much smaller. So the rich could put their money in speculation. If they lost it, good night. It didn't matter. Then I would also control international. See, what we have now, we have this vast amount of money that flies around the world at the touch of a button, and so smaller countries can be completely wiped out. I mean, you can flush money in and flush money out and completely destabilize their economies, and that's what was done to Russia. That's what was done to the Asian economies, and that's what goes on now. Now, if you're going to do that, you can transfer money, but that money must stay in a country for at least 6 to say a year, so it's true investment, not just this gambling business. As I've said, I would abolish the Fed and set up a system where you have an independent agency to set monetary policy and fiscal policy, both, because the two must work together. I would stop the cozy money club. So what is the cozy? Well, let's take Timothy Geithner. He started off in Wall Street. He was then head of the Federal Reserve in New York. Then he went to the Treasury, and now he's back in Wall Street. I mean, a lovely revolving door of the cozy money club where the money boys look after themselves. They're looking after this wonderful system here. They don't give a damn about that system, as long as they can rob it blind. I do believe in employee ownership. Winco here has come to town, employee owned. I think that's the way to go. I do not believe the guys at the top have all the brains and deserve to be paid tens of millions a year for the privilege. I've never seen the great brains that their payment commands. I've seen great brains, but usually not at the top of corporations. I mean, I work for Xerox, and just to couple of things. I worked in England for ICL, which was the leading computer maker, and we worked on advanced research. We were doing electron beam welding of computer chips on a big metal ceramic substrate, very, very advanced technology. That was in the mid-60s. In the early 70s, am I going to what? Oh, my wife says I speak too much. I'm sorry. But you wanted me to talk, so I'm nearly finished. Anyway, so Xerox bought SDS, which is Scientific Data Systems. I went out there in early 70s, and they still had discrete transistors on boards. I mean, they were way, then we bought that. I mean, then they didn't stay in the small copiers because no money is made there. So the Japanese came in. Well, so anyway, so All right. Well, I've also made the point that to get good full employment without inflation, you have to have competition in the market. So you really do need a flourishing, a true capitalist system, not this sort of phony world we're living in now. Thank you, folks. I will entertain some questions.
All right, now is the time for questions. Who wants to be first?
Steve?
You just said one thing that piqued my interest about Thatcher emphasizing the family, whereas Keynes emphasized prior to that, an interrelated big picture economy. Was that thought crystallized in the writings of that thought, that is, about the family? Was that something that was advanced by Friedman or any other of the supply side economists? Or
No,
is that something she came up with?
It's a general view of the right wing, really, that, it's rugged individualism and self-reliance and so on. And so it's the individual and the family that matters. And she said there's no such thing as society.
I just wondered if that was actually concretely placed somewhere in some economists' writings. If there was a trace to that.
Well, it actually is all part and parcel of really the supply side philosophy. Yeah, it's part of an ideology, if you like, and it like we see it here: rugged individualism, self-reliance, independent, and so on. It's a nice thought. The problem is it doesn't work on the macro side. You can't aggregate all the individual families up. And that will work. It won't work. As I said before, when a big crash happens, the only way out is government, which is the whole community. Chap at the back.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Oh, take it. Good on you, Susie.
Hello. Okay. Well,
Yes.
there I am.
I'm listening. Carry on.
The system the way it is, I always kind of had a thought that if the system was good, had been so good to you over the years that I don't know what number you would set. Let's say if you were at a point that you made 30 million a year, then at that point, then whatever was above that would go back into taking care of the needy and the less greedy and so forth. Is there a name for that?
You mean sort of a noblesse oblige? Which is translated is the fact that if you're wealthy and rich, and in fact it goes back to some early Christian writings that the purpose of wealth really was to help the community, and that was that in the writing of Saint Augustine and people like that. That's in early Christian philosophy. Now, the point is that, as I said, the wealth in a few hands actually distorts the economy. I mean, it doesn't flow back, as I said, to this productive sector that we need. Okay? Yeah.
They could put it back in.
But well, they could, but they won't. They don't.
No, but some sort of policy or something that.
Well,
that at that point there would be a cutoff level, and then
right.
it would continue,
Well,
but everything over
yeah.
there would be confiscated.
Yes, in an earlier discussion, I brought in the company in Spain that is entirely employee owned. That has a range of salaries of 6 to 1. So the top guy only earns more 6 to 1 the bottom guy. I think there's a decent range here, but these the real problem is that the theory of the capitalist business was the fact that you have shareholders, and then they have the board of directors that then control the operations of the company. In fact, that's what's happening is totally reversed. You have the CEO that elects the board of directors, and he does what he wants and pays himself what he wants, and really these shareholders don't count. Mind you, they're only there average 22 seconds, so why would they count? So the system sort of went backwards from its original intention. The way that companies like John Lewis works, which is entirely in England, entirely 90,000 people, which I've talked about before. John Lewis is the major store. It has two sections. One is a regular department store, John Lewis. It has Waitrose, which is groceries. Entirely employee-owned. It outperforms every company in England. I mean, beats Tesco, Asda, which is Waitrose, hands down. Every Christmas it has bumper sales. And the way it works is that the employees, if they have a complaint, they can write anonymously, and they must be answered by the management. In fact, the way it works is they vote in at the local level, their representative, and then their representative votes in the board of directors. Okay.
Who's got the microphone? Who's got the microphone? Get the microphone. DJ, you're not DJ, you got a camera. That's not a machine. I got the microphone. I got the microphone. Oh yeah, I got lots of them. You're done. You're done.
Okay, Hank,
I'm
fire away.
wasting time. I'm wasting time. Did you say the first thing we have to do is get manufacturing back?
Yeah.
I thought the first thing we have to do is kill all the lawyers. That's what I heard. I read it somewhere.
Well, they said that was a good start or something like that, didn't they? Okay.
Yes. Should investment income be taxed the same as earned income? Maybe you commented on that earlier. And should there be a transaction tax on investment income, all transactions?
Yes, I mentioned both. I proposed introducing a Tobin tax to stop this vast speculative activity, and I would probably tax capital gains at the same rate as income. Right now it's about half. And I showed the chart earlier that showed that, yeah. Yeah, the hedge fund managers are making out like bandits right now, yeah. Yeah, I mentioned that.
Oh, sorry, I got it. I'll pass it over to you, Jim. John.
Yes.
One of the things that you said that kind of piqued my interest is you were talking about how we needed to limit people coming from other countries into here for technical training and technical jobs.
Yeah, no, not technical jobs. I said coming to the most prestigious, most research labs in universities, where this advanced research is going on.
Right.
Because what I said was that advanced research is going straight back to China and India.
Okay. And the reason I was asking about that is that I think that's an interesting topic. I think a lot of times, my curiosity is how do you suggest we do that, considering that we don't have enough people in the United States trained in those fields?
That is, well, we again, it's a question of supply and demand. Back in the actually, the reason many of you had wondered why I came to this country. Well, back in the 60s was the space race, see, and they couldn't get engineers, so companies like Xerox went to Europe to recruit. So they looked for people with specialized skills. I happened to have one they needed, and so I was recruited. They made me an offer, sounded good to me. Certainly looked better than I was getting in England. It was a good move, a wise move. We came and we thought it was wonderful. I mean, it really was. So we've enjoyed it. We like being here. Hello, Ray. Yes.
How do you bring manufacturing back?
Okay. Well, one way, Ray, is to make trade balance to the point where it's not economical to manufacture overseas. Okay? Because we can't run, Ray, you say that, you cannot run a trade deficit like this indefinitely. It's just not possible. Okay?
That doesn't answer the question.
Okay, well, what I'm saying is, if it's less profitable, because see, as I say, in the old days, in the gold standard, what would happen is you'd run out of gold, so the prices would decline in your country and rise overseas. Now that's what Keynes would so if you introduce the Keynes plan, okay, I don't want to go into, one day I'll go into depth, but what would happen, he advocated a clearing bank, an international clearing bank, whereby the countries that ran a trade surplus, their currency would rise in value. Those that had a deficit, their currencies would decrease. So over time, it would mean that the stuff coming in from China, in this case, would increase in price. Americans would decrease. So because of the fact that there's costs in transporting stuff, gradually it would be worthwhile for America to start manufacturing again. That's how you do it. So if Keynes' policy had been accepted by Harry Dexter White in 1944, instead of being rejected, we wouldn't have got into this mess. And Britain wouldn't have been in this monetary straitjacket for about 3 decades. So we would have been better off too. So both countries suffered. That's the simple answer to your question. That's the way to do it. But because it can't go on, it's not sustainable. You can't run, up to $1 trillion deficit a year forever. It's not possible, is it? And meantime, the Chinese are getting stronger, and they're sending their best students over here to suck out what technology there is in America. I mean, it's done. It's really, really done. And I can't believe it. So that's the way I'd do it. Jim.
Hello? Okay, I'm on. My question really goes to Ray's question, and that is that those jobs that we exported to China are not coming back. They're gone. My point is this, is that if we're going to have a balanced economy where demand does equal supply, then what we have to do is we have to grow a new economy, and for that you need an industrial policy, and for that you need general agreement between the public sector and the private sector that focuses on one thing and one thing only, funding education. That's the only way we're going to get out of this mess. And my question to you is, do you favor an industrial policy, and do you agree with that?
Yes and no. What I would point you to is Germany. Now Germany did not deindustrialize. They didn't ship their manufacturing base overseas. They've kept their manufacturing, and they have all these Mittelstand companies that are funded long-term by banks, and they have an export surplus. So they've kept jobs in Germany because they believe and they've kept manufacturing. The reason they did this is via innovation. I mean, when you go back to Europe, now I'm refurbishing a house over there, the things you buy, the innovations you can get, you just don't see them here. For example, my wife here wanted to buy a sliding door that was a lift and slide, like a van door. You open up, it comes like that, and it slides. You can get that in England. It's German. Can't get that here. Everything you touch, from faucets to appliances and stuff, comes out of Germany. It's superior. I mean, because they've innovated, they have superior stuff, and we let that go here. I mean, you remember the big American cars? I mean, the engines, we had fancy chrome on the outside, but the inside didn't change for 20 years until the Japanese came. So it's a bit of both. I mean, the advanced research, like as we used to do in the Bell Labs, okay, has gone. So, yes, the government can fund research in universities. It can fund poor kids to go there and be the innovators and so on. It can fund them starting up companies. One of the reasons, I left England, there was no possibility of starting up a business. There was you couldn't borrow money. You go to a bank and they'd say goodbye. I mean, we were in that straitjacket. So there has to be this funds flowing back to create businesses, to create innovation, to get going as a country. I don't believe America is out of it, it's lost its inventive capacity, can't create new jobs, can't create new industries. I mean, we're crying out for, somebody must, we need to spend a ton of money on Alzheimer's, for example. A huge problem. But, God, we don't have any money. We don't have the money to do all these things, but we can put up with 20 million unemployed. We can't put them to work productively. It's a nonsense. It's a complete economic failure. Here you have this productive capacity not being used. Doesn't make sense. Does not make sense. So yes, the government plays its role. I would have them funding two things. Education, the universities, the top flight research, also funding business startups. And I don't care if they're washing windows, what the hell they're doing, they're working. Let's give the young people a chance. Yeah, and infrastructure, sure. Yes, ma'am.
Now you've got this situation. It's not like just the manufacturing jobs that have gone overseas, but you've got the deportation of the thinking, the engineering. I've heard even accounting and legal that because they can work 24 hours and have all the people that are doing the thinking, and so you've got and then at the same time you've got these people that are at their prime in life, that are in their 50s, that are unemployed, very talented and smart people. And so what does that say when you have, there's not, these people that have families and they're in that whole middle-aged group that got downsized or right-sized, whatever you want to call it, in 2008. What do you, all these people, it's just such a waste. And small businesses, and there's so much need, but like you say, it's very difficult here to start a business. You can't compete with Starbucks or Walmart, It's, I love to support people like Barbex because you're right here
well, what you've had is a gross economic failure, really, because you've followed the wrong policies. You followed the 1% who wanted to steal everything and ship, And so you've followed wrong gods, actually. That's what you've done. As I say, I've laid out a few, techniques or plans to change things around. And I think it could be. It's not too late, but it can be changed around. And I think it's going to have to be changed around, because if you do not change this around, we're headed for total disaster. Because one day, the Chinese won't buy any more bonds, and there'll be a crash in the dollar, and there'll be nothing here to replace the incoming goods. Goodness me, the Chinese are now selling us food, drugs, everything. Come on.
Do you think that we were seduced? I keep hearing about, there's so much more, the electronics and everything we're getting by China. We're seduced by getting more cheap stuff. At what expense, though? What have we lost?
Well, what we've done is mortgage our future, really. That's what we've done. But we've not, we've not paid for it, basically. It's not like having a credit card that's great when you get it. You say, oh, I can borrow on this and borrow on that, and keep on. One day, you reach the limit. Well, the US is close to reaching that limit now. And I keep saying this, and we do not change our ways. We elect somebody who's going to change everything and basically changes nothing. Now, of course, he was hampered all the way, but nevertheless, he did not, Obama this is, he did not get up and tell the American people the truth.
I would agree.
And when you get up and you tell the truth, it's sort of like Churchill in the war, when Britain was standing alone. Had no allies fighting for it, and Churchill said, I offer you nothing but blood, sweat and tears, and we'll never surrender. That's what he said. And the people stood by him. Now, the same spirit must happen here. The leader should stand up and say, look folks, we're in a mess, and this is what happened, and this is why it happened. And this is the plan we're going to follow to pull out of it, okay? And I think some of the things I've said would pull us out of it. The biggest thing is to implement the Keynes plan. That's the biggest thing. And I keep on, I've told Ray about Bretton Woods, and one day maybe he'll read about what happened out there. Yes, so good.
Our infrastructure is so needy right now. That such investment, such public investment in healthcare, education, and just the railroads. Hello,
everything. Everything.
This would be a public benefit to everyone, not just like socialism. It's getting a new system.
As I say, we have this resource available, but we're not using it. It's not like saying, well, we've got all these family members, and we've got Jack here lying in bed every day, let him get up and get out to work. We're just not using all of our resources properly. It is not, by the way, none of this is rocket science, really. It's not difficult mathematics. It's kind of what I would say logical thinking. But when you have people who portray this ideological nonsense, they talk about, you've got 20 million people unemployed, and they're living off benefits because they don't want to work, and stuff like that. That's just ideological garbage, really. If people offer them, generally speaking, if they're offered a chance to work and better paying conditions, they'll work. As I say, in the 50s and 60s in England, there was work. Everyone was working. And here too.
I think there's a lot of people out there that want very badly to work. And
they're desperate.
I know there are.
People are desperate to work. They really are. No, I'm against people, getting benefits and not working. I'd rather see people, especially the young people. When I graduated with my bachelor's degree, I had about 10, 15 different jobs and offers. Now we need to go back to times like that. It's not impossible to do. But we've just, now there's offshoring of everything. You ask people that, like Cisco, I was talking to this Russian lady today, too much my wife said, but anyway, she said that she's a translator, and she says that all the service of Cisco, which is a telecommunication, is off in India, and the service is diabolical. So it saves money, but you get rubbish service.
I think that the closer that you get to your the employees, that the closer we get them back to home, the better. Customer service, not just in technology fields, but everything.
But everything.
Get on the phone and try to talk to them. But that seems to be, anyway, I'll pass the mic now, but it seems to be like a mindset in the management of these companies that it's not just, again, anything can be workers. You
Right,
know? And
right.
people used to feel secure. White collar workers used to feel secure. There's not much security in any.
No, this insecurity was done intentionally because then you have this huge reserve army of unemployed, which these people like to see, you know. Now, I mean, I was in management most of my career, and in fact, my job was to make everybody under me successful. I mean, I couldn't do all the work; the people did the work, and so I tried to put every person in the right slot and be successful. That was my job. Now, that's the way a government should work, to make the whole country successful, not promote the wealth of these 1%. Who, as I've said, do not invest in the country. It's vast speculation that goes on, which is absolutely no benefit to the whole economy whatsoever.
Okay, so I have a very quick question, and I'm just going to remind everybody that it's 8:20, so that if people wanted a chance to rebut or make remarks, we're getting really short on time. So my question is, you suggested that government should spend during times, you know, when we need recovery, and that's called stimulus, and we've definitely taken advantage of it here in Texas. We know that, although Governor Perry would decry it. My question is, after that period of stimulus has ended and you don't need all that and you're trying to prevent inflation, how do you get government to come back down? And maybe that's a rhetorical question.
Well,
to dial it down and stop.
Yes, this is, well, you start slowing down, you know, investment in you know, shovel, you know, roads and whatnot. I mean, you just slow that down, you know. So it's a trick to do, but that's what you do. You do, yeah.
I think we're out of questions. Looks like, oh, one more? Oh, we're out of questions. Got one more there.
This may be a stupid question, but I'm not an economist. But, okay, so what do we really mean by manufacturing? And should that same definition apply throughout time, throughout the 40s? Should it mean the same thing in 1945 as it does today? And the reason I'm asking that is because, to me it seems, when I think of manufacturing, tell me if I'm wrong, to me it seems A, a person makes things, okay? And B, that person works for someone else. And the reason that's important is because today, there are many companies that start up to where there are either computer applications or technology which help the owners of that business do everything themselves. So they don't really need employees so much. They don't need manufacturers. So is the manufacturer the person that makes the technology or writes the code? I don't think so. But that's essentially what's happening now, is that code is doing the job that a manufacturer did in 1945. Am I wrong?
No, you're right that technology actually is rather like in the early or the late 17th century, the 18th century, when steam power came in. Okay, and you had the Luddites who said, well, this will steam power now will replace all of our jobs. Okay, well, what happens is this society has all these needs that I've outlined. I mean, you have tremendous you need tremendous advances against cancer and so on and so forth. So there are always more needs. Now, it's not quite manufacturing, but it does involve oftentimes technology. Okay, so it's not the old manufacturing like as the Luddites knew it. It's new technology, and well, it's really, to an economist, it's really this productive goods and services of this economy. So yes, it does include services. So I'm using, it won't only be goods. It'll actually be services. I mean, what is software writing? Is that manufacturing or service? I mean, you're writing, well, what is manufacturing? I mean, food production is manufacturing. A lot of things are manufacturing that you don't think of as typically manufacturing. But you know, if one society is continuing to need things, then of course what happens is of course, probably shared out, the working day decreases. I mean, in Europe now, hardly anyone works 40 hours a week anymore. I mean, in my last job in 1968, I was working 37 hours a week, even then. And so you don't need it. I mean, Tom has brought this up in the past. If you really don't need that man-hour output, then you can reduce the working week, give people more leisure. I mean, that was the promise of increased GDP, that people would have more leisure time. But you can't have this gross imbalance where you ship everything overseas. You know, that won't work. Because what you're doing is basically you're cutting off advanced technology and advanced research. So we actually, in the end, won't be doing research in anything. I mean, to cure Alzheimer's, it will all be done overseas. Yeah. So, anyway.
Turn to sit down. Okay, now it's your turn to talk. So you get to respond to what the speaker said, and yeah, I see we have somebody here already.
Well, this is one of the last talks that I thought I would have anything to remark on. And Mr. Beesley, I realize now that we can honorably call you Dr. Beesley. I didn't know that before. And, pardon?
That's okay.
Okay. Oh, all right. I was very impressed by one method that you used. You know, you can teach people orally or visually or with the crack of a whip in a lot of different ways, and you used a visual approach on part of this to illustrate a very important part of the economy is supported often by beautiful women. That was very clever. You get it? Susie? I don't know a lot about economics. I had Economics 101 and 102 by the classic author in the early 60s whose book was used all over the country, and decided I really liked physics a lot better. And also had an English professor who the first day in one of my English classes, he said, well, now, we know that Shakespeare was the best writer in English we've ever had, so if he were to be graded, it would be 1,000. And then so-and-so would be 700, and then 500, and on down. And the very best college student would be graded 100, and the rest of you down from there. Right then, I knew that course was a waste of time. And because of him, and because of seeing that in so many areas, there are people who come up with these theories that they base on all of these so-called facts over eons of time, including in physics. There are things in physics that are still in the books today that I'm convinced are totally wrong. In any event, I coined the term for that portion of the very honorable world of academia, the world of academia. I totally agree with you. I think that the first three things that we need to do in this country is get rid of the Fed, get rid of the Federal Reserve, an unconstitutional private banking system that Thomas Jefferson warned us about over and over again. If we let a private bank get control of our money through inflation, deflation, and the corporate structure that will grow up around it, because it can fund any business to take over any area of the economy that it wants. The Fed is totally unmonitored and can just produce that money out of thin air just like that. And I did, as I have told you before, read part of what's in the Federal Reserve manuals. The fellow who had them, he doesn't have them anymore, I'll guarantee you. But it states in there that the chairman of the board of directors of the Federal Reserve is supreme in power over the president, the Congress, and the judicial branch of the United States. And these, I am sure, are more classified documents than nuclear secrets. If you don't believe in conspiracies, then keep practicing bad. And read the book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, to learn what this federal bank is. It is largely responsible for what has happened to this economy. And it's part of the international banking system, which is responsible for bankrupting more countries around the world than you can imagine. As far as giving away secrets and so forth, one of the most flagrant things I ever noticed was that when the Chinese forced one of our surveillance aircraft down in China, and everybody got off the airplane, Washington, D.C. ordered them not to push the button that would destroy that airplane. With all of that technology on board, it went right into the hands of the Chinese. I consider that act to be treason. It came right from the White House of Clinton. I think what's happening to this country is so clear. The middle class American, who else other than just a few people around the world, will pick up arms, go anywhere in the world to fight for the freedom of people we don't even know. Look how often we've done that. Now, more often than not, I will say that our government has deceived us and taken us into illegal wars, like everything going on in the Middle East, like the war in Vietnam. These are just, we are the criminals in those wars, in my opinion. And I hate to say that, because I love our Constitution, I love what our founding fathers did, and I loathe almost everything in Washington, D.C. today. Frankly, when you get out of the U.S. media and so forth and read from other sources, I feel more allied in spirit with what Putin is doing in Russia than our government here in the United States. And remember that the people who are driving these things in the world are putting together the so-called New World Order. If they accomplish it, that will be the end of our economy and the end of our freedom worldwide. Anyway.
Okay, who's next? You want to be next? All right, you're next. Yeah, I know. He's getting down there. A few minutes, that's it.
Well, we had mentioned about the 70s and the 80s and the experience we had in not only America but in the UK and Great Britain. And John even mentioned that during the late 60s and the early 70s, you could not start a business. You could hardly get a job. It was just a difficult, terrible environment. So what did he do? He came here because we had a whole lot better environment for businesses. But during the 70s, even Jimmy Carter said we were in a malaise, and he used that very word. He knew what was going on. It was dreadful. And we had Reagan, and when Reagan came, he lowered taxes, and he got rid of a whole lot of just oppressive government. And he let business know that our country is business friendly. And that sent a very important message. Don't you realize that during the 80s, with Reagan and what he did, we had one of the strongest economies we have ever had. The 80s well into the 90s. When Bill Clinton got up and did the keynote speech this last time, remember the wonderful speech he gave, he was glad to accept credit for that. Most of what he did would have hurt the economy. He was still riding the Reagan Revolution, but he's been always shameless in regard to all of his morals, so just going ahead and taking credit for somebody else was just a very small peccadillo. With Great Britain, they had Thatcher. She broke the back of that sorry union that was absolutely crushing them. The steel union just about was strangling the country. I believe John will agree, and he will tell me, there was a one union boss, you did what he said or else. He had the government of England by the throat. And whenever she broke that union, the country took off. They also had a good 80s and 90s. So they had a good, strong country and economy. Also, he said that during Reagan, it did not pay for itself. It did not pay for itself because Reagan had a Democrat Congress. They spent and they spent and spent. Take a look. The more money came into the federal treasury during the late 80s and early 90s than we had ever seen before. It was a boom. The money came in because people were working and they were paying their taxes, and the money came into the treasury, but the government spent it. All right, right now, one of the crushing things of our economy, folks, is more and more government. People don't want to get into business. They can't get into business. If they get into business, they've got, you tell me some of them, the EPA, the ADA, the FDA, the IRS. There are a parade of government agencies that are strangling and hurting our economy. And it isn't going to change unless government change and gets out of our face. We need to let our country and our people know that we are business friendly and they are welcome. Otherwise, we will stay on the track that we're on now. Dankeschön.
Okay, who's next? We're running out of time. Susie.
Thank you, John, for your talk. I always appreciate hearing what you have to say. I know that you are taking a long-term historical perspective, and you've provided a lot of contrast to us as to what has happened. And I just really believe your remarks a little bit more than I believe the last speaker's remarks over what technically happened, I mean, from an economic perspective. I do believe that it is important to invest in education, not cut it to the tune of $5 billion and then pretend to go back and refund it when you would already cut it. I think that that is an important distinction between political parties here in this state, in this country, but particularly in this state. And what I would like to see government do a lot less of is deciding how they're going to control my physical body, and maybe do a little bit more of the things that we need them to do, like protecting the environment so that we can all live healthy without cancer, etc. There are a whole lot of other things that I think government can only do that individuals in private sector will not do, like build the infrastructure. And I think it's important to point those things out. And again, I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I'll cut myself off now. Thanks.
Anyone else? Or am I the last one standing? I guess I'm the last one standing. All right, well, I want to thank John for a great speech, what he did here tonight was terrific. I thought it was really good. He covered every base there is to be covered. To quote somebody from England, Winston Churchill once said, the Americans can always be counted on to do the right thing after they try everything else. And that's kind of where we're at. We are on the decline. Our jobs have gone overseas. We can't support our infrastructure. We really need to put tariffs on corporations, in my view, not countries. Because you put a tariff on another country, you got a price war. You put it on a corporation, it's a little different. Every product incorporated could have a tariff equal the difference in labor and environmental costs. Then the Apple, for example, produces everything in China and sells it here. They don't have any jobs or producing anything. So they'd say, well, we don't want to pay that tariff. Well, you don't have to. All you do is produce it here. You won't have to. So you produce here what you sell here. It makes things a little simpler. And you're going to end up, you'd be able to do something else too. Once you did that, you'd have control over your industry, because you don't have it today. Industry is controlling you. Corporations are controlling our government. Corporations are controlling our Congress. Corporations are paying, they got the best Congress money can buy. I've said that before, but it's true. And because they control it, they control the world. They can do what they want, they go anywhere they want. And that's the biggest problem we have, in my view. We got to change our Congress, we got to do something about, we got to put tariffs on corporations overseas. Then we can think about something, once we do that, we can think about something else too. I was from the railroad industry. They got rid of the cabooses, whatever, on the engines, so we got too many people. They get rid of the people. They got 2 people on a train now. We used to have 5 people working for everyone that's on pension. Now there's 5 people on pension for everyone that's working. The Railroad Retirement Board went to the corporation and said, you got to pay more for retirement costs. We can't afford these people are on retirement. So now the corporation's paying 2.5 times what the employee pays. 2.5 times. That's what's going on today. And they don't mind doing it because they're making a fortune, because they got rid of everybody. So this is kind of what happened. If you look at history, 1938, they shortened the workday in this country and went to from a 10-hour day to an 8-hour day. It was a federal law, not a state law. It only affected interstate commerce. And big corporations screamed like stuck pigs, but they had options. They could break up, de-merge, form smaller companies, get around the restrictive labor law. Within 5 years, there was an unholy alliance. Big business and labor went to each state legislature, put the small business people on a shorter workday. State laws to put a shorter workday in the states. This is how we got the 8-hour day. This is how we got the 40-hour work week. And if you look ahead, machines replace people. Machines don't pay taxes. People pay taxes. We've got 25 million people out of work in this country. We've got to put them back to work. How are you going to do it? Well, you're going to have to shorten the workday. You're going to have to get tariffs on corporations. This is the direction to go in. And that's what I think has to happen. And I really got to thank John for being here tonight. He did a great job. And John, you get to comment on a comment and close this meeting. You get the last word.
And the word is goodbye. This is the anniversary of an event, a signal event that took place in Cleveland. And that event was that the river, Cuyahoga River, caught fire. So, you know, the American people there woke up, and in fact, I believe it was the first black city manager, Carl Stokes, and he raised money from the citizens to clean up the act. Okay, so there are, and the whole business of clean air and so on. I'm afraid the problem with some corporations is they will pass the cost of their operations onto the rest of the community, and in fact cause the community to bear the brunt of it. And when you pollute the environment, you cause cancer and so on and so forth. So passing legislations like this is not being anti-business, it's really being pro-community. Now, what I have proposed is again, I want more business. And I propose that methods to promote it. I want business to grow and prosper. What I've shown here is that business is not getting enough supply side, even though the supply siders say they promote it. In fact, what's gone on is in fact not enough supply side, not enough investment has gone back into the productive sector of America, which is what we need. So really. I think it's a misnomer to say that what I propose is either anti-business or anti-environment. But I think we have enough money done rightly because we have 20 million people unemployed to do both. Actually, I don't see what the problem is. Yeah, we have to apportion our money wisely and not waste it. But that's supposedly what we have politicians for, right? And now. Now, if you don't like them, then you should get up and complain. The problem really is in America, as we know, that most of them are bought and paid for by the very people that have done so very well out of the running of this economy. But what I've also showed tonight is that this doing so well has actually started to wreck the economy. It's been underfunded for years now, and it cannot continue. And what I'm concerned about is there will be, it can't go on, and when it does crash, there will be a mighty crash. I mean, Robert Skidelsky, who was a biographer, he's an economist, a biographer of Keynes, 3 volumes well worth reading. He said there's, because people haven't woken up, there's going to have to be another couple of crashes before people. Well, goodness me, I don't want to see another couple of crashes, because we've had every 8 years since the 80s we've had a recession, and each one has been longer and deeper than the last. Okay, because this financial system that I talked about is still operating the same old way it did before, and it's this system that's caused the crashes. So, what I would say is, I'd stick to my guns and say I would propose to do what I've suggested. I think it's business friendly. I think it's people friendly and environment friendly, and I think we can do properly managed. We can promote all those three things we want, but certainly, education, investment is the key to a prosperous country, and my wife's country, Finland, really goes to town on promoting education. I mean, one of my when I met one of my friends again, he had an American wife, and I was talking about, they lived in England then, and she went, oh, Finland, blah, blah, blah. Well, almost every week now you hear about the educational system in Finland being so good, because they concentrate on it. And basically it's another free system, but they train teachers very well. And they revere teachers. Here, the poorest teachers wind up in the poorest schools. And you have a culture that really doesn't value education, and sort of intellectuals, like, Obama's no good because he's an intellectual. I mean, he actually thinks. I'm not necessarily promoting Obama, but I mean, it's a cultural idea that you must have an ill-educated moron as president. I mean, come on. I want somebody who could think, who could come up with innovative ideas and explain them to the people. Why does this make sense to do this or not? And, but we don't get any of that. We don't have these fireside chats that we used to have. And as I say, we need a champion for America, really. That's what we need.
Okay, we're going to retire to Starbucks down the street. Our speaker's welcome down there. We'll buy him some coffee. And that's it for this. We will not be back till July 12th, just so you know. Thank you.
This is William, your videographer from Two Hats Publishing. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, please leave comments below, or like us, or follow us, and get notices of all our videos. We love it even when you call. So when visiting the Barbeck's restaurant, tell them you want your reservation to the next College